Hi there, my name's Hatty, you're watching Midwinter Minis, and this is the start of Sporktober. What is Sporktober? Sporktober is a competition that Guy and I are running throughout the month of October. The challenge is to paint any Ork or Undead style miniature in a retro 90s colour scheme. See, that's where we get the name. Not Orktober, not Spooktober. Sporktober. We decided to run this competition because it's a mix of what we both love in this hobby. For Guy, it's all things orcs and the nostalgia for the old style of painting, and for me, it's my deep love for everything spooky. If you saw my Unclean Boogie video from last October, you'll already be aware, and also because painting with very bright colours gives me a large amount of serotonin. Now, for the rules. You can paint any Ork or Undead style miniature, Games Workshop or not. Retro, modern, 3D printed, whatever you want. By Ork, we mean any typical greenskin model. Goblins, grots, nobs, and big stompy walkers and vehicles are fine too. By Undead, we mean literally anything spooky. Skeletons, witches, vampires, zombies, ghosts. Basically, if there could be a really bad Halloween B-movie about it, it qualifies. Anyone can enter, regardless of age or location. We're running this competition across both Instagram and our Patreon. Patreon.com/midwinterminis if you'd like to join us, with different prizes for both. If you're entering through Instagram, please use the hashtag Sporktober23 when posting pictures of your minis. You can enter both the Ork and Undead side of the competition if you like, but only one entry in each category per person, please. Active Patreon supporters will be able to post photos in the hashtag Sporktober23 chat room in the Midwinter Minis Discord server, but again, please only one entry per person per category. Judging will take place on October 25th, so please have your entries ready and posted before midnight on October 24th UK time, and we'll be in touch with the winners for your prizes shortly after. So get building, painting and entering. I'm so excited to see what you all come up with. Now, on to what I'm painting in this video. To demonstrate what can be done for Sporktober, I'm going to be painting up this spare skeleton warrior we had from Cursed City in the retro 90s style. I've never actually painted this style before, but I've always liked it. I love the vibrancy of the colours, and the drab, grim, darky modern paint style just doesn't quite do the same thing for me. So, first we need to give him that old school 90s base by putting a little layer of super glue all over and then covering it in sand. Now, I'm going to be following the old heavy metal painting book from the 90s by Mike McVeigh for this miniature, just to try and get the 90s vibes right, but I'll do my best to try and match the old Citadel paints to modern purchasable equivalents where I can, because I know not everybody has access to these rarities nowadays. Then it's time to prime it. Bright white is always best for the old style of painting to make those vibrant colours really pop. And luckily for me, in this book there's a whole page on painting skeletons. For the base coat, it suggests using the old Citadel inks, which I know were real paints they sold, but we have plenty of actual inks lying around here, so I'm using a 50-50 mix of FW yellow and antelope brown thinned with water. Actually this mix looks a little bit too yellow for me. I think I'm going to mix it up again, but with this more red tone brown, burnt umber. Much better, so I'll plop it on all over the skeleton. I think it's already looking like a good match to the book. That was easy. Next we need to dry brush up from light brown to a bone colour. The closest approximation to the old Ork brown I could find was Citadel's Hobgrot hide, so we'll start there. I'll get a tiny bit of paint on the brush and then brush away most of the excess before taking it to the model and doing an ever so gentle circular motion all over the bone bits. And then thankfully we have a pot of old bleach bone for me to colour match to a newer paint, and none of the ones we had were a perfect match, but the closest I could get was Crypt Bone from TT Combat. So we'll mix that in with Hobgrot hide about 50-50 and then do the exact same dry brushing technique all over the bone. Then do another lighter mix until the final dry brush of pure Crypt Bone. Yeah, I'd say that's looking pretty spot on from what I can tell. I'm going to add a couple of final finishing details on the bone, like a dot of pure brown ink into the mouth and eye sockets and a tiny white highlight on the teeth and brows, and then we'll move on. Now to start on the metal details. I'm going to use a medium silver, in this case Citadel's Iron Hand Steel, for the initial coat so we can make it brighter later. I'm being a bit loose with my instruction following here and adding a black wash to that silver once it's dry, just to add a little bit of contrast, and then I'm going back to what the book suggests and adding a brown and orange ink mix to dirty the silvers down and make them look all old and rusty. And then I'm finally going to dry brush all the silver details with a bright silver like Citadel's Stormhost Silver. The book suggests sticking to a palette of reds, creams, blacks and purples for skeleton teams, so I'm going to do just that and paint his robes a nice bright purple. For the main colour I tried to find a close enough match for the old worm purple, and since we don't have a pot of that, I had to guess at TT's Gomorrah Lilac. This model has the same problem I'm finding with a lot of modern minis. The sculpt with the cool pose makes it pretty much impossible to actually get your brush into all the areas, or if you do, you splodge paint on everything else. It's so annoying. Look at this old Games Workshop Hero Quest skeleton, it would be so much easier to paint in this style. Now for the shading. I struggled here to find a good blue to mix in, but I settled for Macragge. I mean, it's certainly a colour. Whether or not I think it looks good is beside the point. Then for the highlight on the cloth, I'm going to mix in a bit of AK White to Gomorrah Lilac and run it along the top edges and folds. Now for the wood. The instructions were a little vague, so I took it into my own hands and chose TT's Driftwood Brown to match the old snakebite leather and coated all the wood details in it. This one actually looks very similar to the old Citadel paint. Then I washed it all over with thinned burnt umber ink and dry brushed up with Driftwood Brown again. Very carefully this time so as not to hit all the other painted parts. I think that actually that dry brush has made the wood look very flat, so I dotted a tiny bit of umber ink into the sculpted pits on the spear to add a bit more of a woody texture. Much better. Now I really wanted to put some of that old school bright red somewhere on the mini, so I'm going to make his shield a nice bright red with gold detailing. Blood red, I found, was one of the hardest 90s paints to match to a modern one. The closest I could get was Blood Rights from TT Combat, but it's still no match for the true bright red king of yore. Now for a nice rich gold. I went for TT's Ducat Gold, but you could use Retributor armor or similar. Now this was a real pain to paint. How in the world are you even supposed to paint this fancy sculpted shield detailing without making a total pig's ear of it? This took me approximately 6 million years of gentle painting, messing up and tidying up with the red, but we finally got there. Now breathe. Also, don't forget to do the back of the shield and the little bit of metal holding the strap down. Then maybe somewhat controversially, I'm now going to wash the whole shield in thinned brown ink. I know it'll knock back those lovely bright colours, but I'll highlight them back up later, I promise. I'm also going to do about 3 extra coats of the brown wash on just the inside of the shield after the first one is dry to give it a tarnished, brassy look. While that all dries, I've decided I'm not happy with the shading on the purple cloth, so I'm going to try and fix it by mixing a tiny dot of that Macragge blue into darker and richer Phoenician purple. Then I'm going to add a final little dot highlight with a lighter mix of Gomorrah Lilac and White to finish it off. That's much better. Now the shield is dry, I'm going to plop a tiny little mix of our original red with Fire Dragon Bright for a nice bright orangey red highlight on all of the highest points of the shield. I'm going in with some more Ducat Gold to layer up the edges of the gold before a final highlight of pure Stormhost Silver to the highest and brightest edges. Now it's almost done, but we need a couple of last little touches. I'm going to do what we're calling blacklining on bits where 2 different colours meet to separate them and add some really stark contrast to the model, almost like outlining in 3D. I'm going to use some black wash mixed in with a little tiny bit of regular black acrylic and just run it into the most obvious colour change edges, such as on the edges of the armour where the cloth meets bone and around the straps. I think that's made a really big difference. It almost looks like it's from a comic book now, I really love it. Then finally, what retro themed mini would be complete without a Goblin Green base? Goblin Green is by far and away the hardest old paint colour match. I thought TT's Tank Green could be a passing swap, but it turned out to be too desaturated when I tried it, so I added a coat of Citadel's Warboss Green, which is supposed to be the match for Goblin Green. Closer, definitely, but still no cigar. So I dry brushed the base with a bright yellow a la retro Warhammer, and then Guy let me use a little bit of his actual old Goblin Green for the base. I mean, there's just nothing that compares quite as well. Just one final optional step of a little bit of matte varnish, and it's done. It's almost like I'm back in the 90s, except now I'm a grown-up human woman and not actively still a baby. I think it turned out really well. I love it. I'm a big fan of colourful minis anyway. I don't think that's any surprise if you're familiar with my previous work. But I don't only like it for the power of the colours, I like how easy it was to paint too. I was worried that this would be really difficult to paint and pass off as retro style, but I'm genuinely proud of what I've achieved here, and it took less than a day to finish too. Let me know what you think in the comments, and also tell me what you're planning on entering for Sporktober. I'm so excited to see all your entries. That's it from me, and I'll catch you next time. Stay spooky!